Chinese relations were fraught long before World War II and the Second Sino-Japanese War. The First Sino-Japanese War, from 1894 to 1895, came after Japan expanded their empire into Korea and then Manchuria. Japan had initially created a trade treaty with Korea, a territory of China at that time, which allowed the two countries to trade metal and food. This caused relationship tensions between Japan and China. After two different coups d'etats with Korea's government, an alleged assassination, and a failed contract known as the Convention of Tientsin, Japan finally took Korea by force and declared war with China. This war lasted a year and ended with the Treaty of Shimonoseki, although Japan still coveted the power and influence over Korea and China it once had. The Second Sino-Japanese War between Japan and China occurred between 1937 and 1945, after Japan pushed their way into China again. Things escalated after Japan's invasion of Manchuria, specifically the incident taking place at the Marco Polo Bridge. The League of Nations, which Japan was a part of at that time, ruled this invasion as a violation of their rules, but couldn't do anything to stop them as they were dealing with problems in Italy. Japan took this as an opportunity to expand their empire and drop out of the League of Nations. The Nanking Massacre began in December of 1937 in China's northern provinces and lasted for 6 weeks, with the death toll falling between 300,000 and 600,000 people.
Due to its large size and convenient trade location, Nanking became the new capital of China. With the population rapidly growing, Japan saw this as an opportunity to try and take over the city. The Japanese soldiers were killing any and all Chinese soldiers and forced many to try and hide by changing into civilian clothing and pretending to be normal residents of the city. The Japanese looted storehouses and stole anything they could from civilian houses. The Japanese also burned many buildings in the city using gasoline and other highly flammable chemicals. There were mass numbers of rape cases that resulted in death. This is how the attack eventually got its name, the Rape of Nanking. These Western merchants had different motives for their reason to stay. Some had their company's financial interest in mind, while others, such as doctors and teachers, felt it was their duty to stay and help in whatever way they could. The International Committee would keep Chinese authorities out of these safety zones and prevent any form of military establishments or offices, any armed men other than civilian police, who were only allowed to have pistols, and soldiers or military officers from being able to take over again. The committee would often inspect and observe these safety zones to ensure that new changes were being carried out respectively. Japan did everything leading up to this point as a search for power.
Japan's hunger for the imperialism ideals shown by Great Britain was set in full force after the First Sino-Japanese War, as Japan had wanted to become their own empire since the 16th century. Japan was not a very powerful country to begin with, as they dealt with many civil wars and political unrest. Though there were many ways to help them grow their empire, Japan felt the need to conquer and kill. Even though their goals were not fully met until the Sino-Japanese War, Japan had started planting the seeds early on with power and influence in Korea. Japan had seen during the First World War what it took to become a powerful country and to get a seat at the table. Japan wanted to be in equality with the other empires and seen as a contender, not a weak, small country. They were also influenced by what they heard from Germany and Italy during this time. Due to this need for glory, Japan was willing to do whatever it would take to get to that level. Watching other empires destroy, conquer, and kill was all Japan knew. This country was willing to sacrifice morals and their own people in order to come out on top, and this mindset was what drove them to commit the Nanking Massacre.
The aftermath of the Nanking Massacre was devastating. Under the orders of General Matsui Iwan, there were an estimated 100,000 to 300,000 casualties, in addition to at least 20,000 cases of rape during the invasion. The majority of the city and surrounding areas were also looted and burned, destroying about one-third of all buildings, making the city inhospitable. With the ending of World War II, General Matsui and his lieutenant were tried and found guilty of war crimes by the International Military Tribunal of the Far East, and were subsequently executed. The logistics over what had occurred during the invasion of Nanking has been a topic of much controversy. There are still no definitive or official answers over how many lost their lives, and much animosity still remains between Sino-Japanese relations over what had occurred. The rape of Nanking has also eluded the majority of the Western world as an event of World War II. Some are credited to the focus of Nazi Germany and the bombing of Pearl Harbor overshadowing the event. Others believe that the Japanese government avoided acknowledgement of the massacres in an attempt to obscure from the world and history itself.
All in all, there are many reasons to why this genocide ended up occurring. Many of them were connected to their imperialism, which made them believe in their superiority over the other Asian races. When China did not go with the 21 demands Japan laid, Japan's sense of superiority made them think that it would be easy to win against China and capture them. When that didn't happen, frustration and hatred started piling up and eventually led to the genocide. Additionally, because the Japanese had a rigid structure and a large belief that dishonor is worse than death, seeing the Chinese flee and hide made the Japanese look down on them even further as cowards, eventually dehumanizing them. The rigid society and strong discipline in the military, as said before, started piling up, eventually causing the Japanese to take it out on the Chinese. There are many possible ways the genocide could have been less severe or avoided. China, for one, had many mishaps that allowed this atrocity to happen. The main Chinese force fled from Nanking, leading Nanking to be easily captured by the Japanese, which allowed the atrocities to happen. Additionally, the acts of the Chinese from fleeing to hiding triggered the Japanese beliefs, which further made the Chinese seem unbearable and worthless. China's lack of a well-trained, organized, and strict military also allowed the smaller forces of Japan to prevail, and Japanese beliefs and circumstances, such as their rigid social structure, eventually caused the Japanese soldiers to break down and allowed this event to happen.